Welcome to Talk to S.A.TV, sponsored by Grand Palace Hotel and Resort, where we discuss most pressing global and national issues. Today, our guest is Ambassador M. Humayun Kabir. Ambassador Kabir, you started your academic career at the University of Dhaka, then transitioned into the diplomacy and transitioned to the diplomatic career, and in different capacities across the globe. How has your experience or academic background help in your diplomatic journey? Our audience would love to know your transition from academia to diplomacy.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I had the opportunity and honor to be associated with the Dhaka University faculty of the Department of Political Science, and at the same time also faculty of law. I used to teach international politics, so that was not very difficult to move from international politics in theory or academic point of view to international diplomacy or international politics in action. So for me, the transition was not that difficult, but well, it's two different worlds. In the academic world, we mostly deal with the theoretical or conceptual aspects of any subject. And when you do the diplomacy, this is the, I would say, implementation of whatever we have learned at the academic level. And this is much more complex. And another thing that is worth mentioning is the fact that diplomacy means that we have to deal with the interest, mostly competing interest at the least, and colliding interest at the most. So one has to really be on toes, try to understand the nature of interests, and try to explore the common ground to build up the relationship. And diplomacy as a profession, as I looked at it, or as I still believe that, it's a profession to build bridges among countries and among people. So that is what we have to do. So it means that whatever we learned at the academic level, we have to little test them, expand them, and also improvise them in the context of the real life.
You were a veteran of War of Independence. You have served in different capacities in different embassies of Bangladesh. And how has your experience in 1971 shaped your worldwide view as a diplomat?
Well, I would say profoundly. Profoundly means diplomacy is a job, it's a profession, but whatever we learned at the field during the Liberation War in 1971, that gave a kind of new depth to my understanding.
The spirit must have given you or shown you the path in the later diplomatic career.
And also the involvement, seeing people in action, living with them, working with them, and understanding their aspirations. So that was something that really, I would say, enriched us, or those who were at the field at that time. So whenever we came to the diplomatic field, diplomacy, as I call it, essentially deals with two things: people and power.
True.
So power means those who are powerful people or different nodes of power in a society. But people are important. So sometimes when we do diplomacy from a very, I would say, professional level, we tend to not ignore, just overlook the component of people. So my experience, field experience in 1971, taught me that the focus should be on the people. And if you ask me, I thoroughly enjoyed all my postings, all my activities, because I could work with people, doesn't matter wherever they were, either in Bangladesh or in India or in Nepal, US or Australia or at the United Nations. So really it reshaped my worldview, if I say so, because nothing could be more important than remaining connected to the birth of a country. I mean, that's the best achievement of our generation. So we are honored to be a part of that. And I look at it as a kind of generational responsibility. Some people say, oh, I have done this, so I must get something. I don't look at that way. I see that was The Liberation War, it was a national call. We tried to respond to that, and that's all. And we have, at least I can tell you that I have not expected to get anything in return, because that was our generational responsibility. We tried to perform our responsibilities.
That must have been a wonderful feeling.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, the generations that we do have right now, they have a revolution. They had that revolution. They toppled down a regime. But back in your days, you went into the war.
Sure.
You came back. You joined the services of the Republic. But in return, you didn't want the share in the power.
No.
But now this generation, they want to share in the power. Isn't it interesting that how it's been transformed? Or is it a progress? Is it a positive progress for you? Have you ever thought back in those days that you will come back and then you will have a share in the power because you have your role. So now you need the piece of the cake as well. So you didn't have that thought at that time. So
No.
do you find it interesting, when you see this generation?
No, very interesting point that you have. Thank you for raising that issue. I would say that during our time, we were, if you can say, we had a very simple vision of life, meaning that this is our call, we should respond to it.
True.
Once it's over, we come back to the academia. I returned to the university, continued my studies, then got a job, happy, and then moved on to diplomacy. I mean, nothing big in terms of aspiration.
True.
It's very modest, a middle class boy's aspiration, and so on and so forth. But life has changed in Bangladesh during the last 53 years' time. We saw a Bangladesh which was poverty-stricken. So we had to struggle with that. The current generation, they are seeing a slightly better Bangladesh. So they have a much larger aspiration. So I don't think there is anything wrong with either with us or with them. They have more opportunities. They have larger aspirations. So their behavior, their expectation could be different. So I see it that way, and I must also admit at this point that last year, I would say exactly today, say 4th or 5th of July. Last year, when I was seeing or watching the movement unfolding, I was trying to understand what we did during our time and how this younger generation is doing during their time.
True.
And I can tell you without any hesitation, I found this new generation to be smarter, more informed, better organized, and I must say that I was really impressed by what they did. In 71, I mean, the whole nation was united. We fought against an occupation force, and that was the call of independence. But this time, the challenge was we were fighting a domestic authoritarian system, which is much more challenging and difficult. But I must give credit to them. They have mobilized, they have led, and eventually or finally they have been successful. But I think then I should also add that they have still a responsibility to make sure that whatever aspirations had driven them and help people to join them, they should deliver on that. And that's their responsibility as a generation. So they should be focused on their objective. And also I must add here, whatever they have achieved, they should continue with that goal, keeping the morality as the basic principle of life. Because if somebody doesn't forget about the moral issue, then it could go astray. It could move in a different direction. So they have achieved something outstanding. They should keep their focus and keep the moral strength. They should always ask themselves why people joined us, what they wanted from us. So that should be their compass for the future.
Wonderful. That must have been a wonderful feeling when you went over there. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to go on a short break. To come back after the break, we will discuss more about international policy and Bangladesh. Welcome to Talk to S.A.TV, sponsored by Grand Palace Hotel and Resort. Before the break, we were discussing how the goal of the generation has transformed after the revolution, after the war, which they went on. Ambassador Humayun Kabir, you were ambassador to US, India, Australia, Nepal, and of course UN. You represented Bangladesh on UN. From these diverse postings, what insights did you gather? How Bangladesh is perceived internationally? How Bangladesh is perceived in the West?
Well, it's a very complex question. Let me explain.
Because you have, represented Bangladesh in different era.
Yes. So, era and also different countries, different
in
contexts.
Different countries, in different continents, I would say. So one continent should, whatever one continent have perceived Bangladesh, the other continents must have, seen Bangladesh in different lens.
Absolutely.
So
let me
would love to know elaborately.
that. Oh no, thank you very much. If I talk about South Asia, I served in two countries, India and Nepal.
Calcutta as a High Commissioner. Yeah.
So if you ask me, our relationship with South Asia is complex but intimate, meaning that South Asia is our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So whenever we have other countries in the neighborhood, we depend on each other. We depend on each other, we work with each other, and when you work and depend on each other, there are good times, there are bad times.
True.
But the reality is, or the fact is, we have to know how to live side by side peacefully. And that sometimes becomes a challenge. But I would say that when I was serving in Washington, my American friends used to ask me, what were your best postings? I used to always say that my best posting was in Calcutta and Kathmandu. And they used to say, you served in Washington twice, New York once, 10 years in the US, and you were telling that your best postings were in Calcutta and Kathmandu? I used to tell them a very simple reply. I used to say that, look, in Calcutta, I was somebody. Mm-hmm. In Kathmandu, I was somebody. In Washington, I am nobody. So, and in Calcutta, relationship was sweet and sour because there were challenges. We have to deal with the challenges. And when you solve a challenge, that gives you better satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And in India, there is a great deal of interest about Bangladesh. In Nepal, there is a great deal of interest about Bangladesh, and vice versa. So it means that we have more space to work
and more greater role to play.
Add more value to the relationship.
True.
And also you can, as I have mentioned earlier, you can intimately mix with the people. Power, yes, diplomacy, we manage powers, but also knowing the people, how they feel about us, helping them to understand Bangladesh better. So that work was more intense in South Asia, both in India and Nepal. Mm-hmm. Now coming back to other, say for example, since I served 3 times in the US, US is very different cup of tea for us, because there Bangladesh is known not by what we have achieved, but not by what we have not been able to achieve. For example, when I was serving in the late 80s, Bangladesh was, generally seen on the negative side. For example, the experience of 70s or up to mid-80s, the floods, cyclone, deaths, hunger, that was the kind of image that the Americans, general public, had. But when I was serving in the 90s, the situation changed because the garments started pouring into the US market. People used to see in the departmental stores, made in Bangladesh, and they started thinking, oh, Bangladesh can produce good quality shirts. So their image started changing. And as we move forward up until say 2008, 2009, during that period, they thought that Bangladesh has come up. They were amazed by our success story on our economic performance, our social indices. So they started looking at this country was possibly the worst country in the world in terms of their economic progress, social progress. Now they have come up and they are doing pretty well. The Americans started changing their, I would say, perception about Bangladesh, and then they started talking about building up partnership with us. So I would say that seeing Bangladesh from 80s up to 2009, I saw a significant change. Earlier, they used to think that Bangladesh cannot live without us. But when I left US back in 2009, they started to think that we need Bangladesh now, because Bangladesh can be a good partner. And eventually, by 2012, the US government and Bangladesh government signed what we call as a partnership dialogue. So that's the structure, putting the relationship into a structural form. So since 2012, relationship has taken a different form. So I would say that in the US, familiarizing Bangladesh as a kind of, you can say, as a kind with a creative kind of population which is creative, resilient, can survive the challenges and can make differences. That was the challenge in the US. But in India it was different. In Australia, same thing. Many Australians were not very familiar with Bangladesh, except the name. But as situations started to improve, many students started to go to Australia, many Bangladeshis moved to Australia, then they started thinking about Bangladesh is coming up. So if you ask me, in general, if I just say from my 30 years experience in diplomacy, that was a great journey. And that was a great experience to be a part of that journey of Bangladesh from a relatively less known country, seen from a negative framework to a positive framework, and now people are looking at us as partners. So I think if we can manage our things well, if we can manage our things well, Bangladesh could do, much better, and could, if I may say so, could create more influence even beyond this capacity, because we have very creative population. And by the way, I should also mention, as I saw, we have 13 million Bangladeshis working in the outside world, and each one of them represents this country.
Absolutely.
And if we could really give some, I would say, capacity into them, then Bangladesh could have done much better. So I think a lot of work about how the world looks at us lies here in Bangladesh. So we have to understand that Bangladesh inside, or Bangladesh domestically, is the heart of how people will look at us in the outside world. So the real task is here. And I would finish by saying that it is important for our, I would say, leadership particularly, or the people at large. We live in an integrated world now. There is no difference between domestic and external. What is domestic is external. What is external is internal. Domestic. So we have to have a kind of objective perception, understanding about how closely Bangladesh is linked to the outside world. And we must invest in improving that understanding, building our capacity on that, and try to integrate seamlessly. The more we get integrated with the global environment, the better future we will have. So we must understand that the outside world is not a bad place for us. Rather, the outside world can help us in our national pursuit for a better future.
You were reiterating about the challenges that we have in South Asia.
Yes.
Especially the Bangladesh is surrounded by India, and even the African Union is more effective than the SAARC,
yes,
the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. So what do you think that how SAARC could be made more effective, or is it impossible to make it effective without the India and Pakistan? Because India and Pakistan is the biggest impediment towards efficiency or efficacy of or capability for SAARC. So what do you think, how do you see any hope that SAARC is working in the near future? Because you have been to Nepal, you have been to India, and you know how the situation is, how hostile they are against each other. And we see that how India, Pakistan tries to have a hegemony over the region. So how a country like Bangladesh could work out in SAARC, and how they could play their own role to make SAARC effective in this part of the world?
Well, thank you. Again, a good question. I would say that we have to keep hope alive. There's no other alternative than that. So Bangladesh, in its modest capacity, has been trying to make South Asia a little bit more, a place more comfortable for everybody. And that inspired the Bangladeshi initiative, which Bangladesh took in early 80s for setting up of the SAARC. It was set up in Dhaka in December of 1985. But unfortunately, in South Asian context, we have not been able to overcome yet our geopolitical mindset.
True.
We can only move forward if we slightly adjust that and focus on the geo-economic potential that we have. Take the case of the economic scenario in South Asia. India is the largest economy in the region. And not only that, India would be among the top 3 economies in Asian continent.
True.
China is the second largest economy in the world, but for Asia, this is the largest economy, $19.5 trillion economic size. Then ASEAN is there, just across the Naf River. ASEAN has $4.5 trillion economy. India, $4 trillion economy. So you can see that we have, right at this time, we have around $30 trillion economy around us. Collectively, almost the size of the United States' current economic size.
True.
$30 trillion US economy, and here also we have $30 trillion. But we have not been able to leverage on that, meaning that we are separated from each other. China doesn't like India, India doesn't like China, ASEAN, we don't have much connectivity because of the Rohingya issue and Myanmar relationship. So South Asia has remained fragmented, if I say so. If we can join hands, India can rise better, and we can also rise along with that, provided we all can join hands. But if we are segregated, India can rise, we can also rise, but that would not be harmonious rise, if I may say so. And during the last month, I think in May, we have seen how perilous, how precarious could be a situation for us. So from here, we could go down, we don't know where, in an abyss. So we have to choose our path. We want to remain as we are, even the largest poverty-stricken population in the world, or we want to be seen as a dignified region which can thrive and make lives better for everyone in all the countries. So this is where I think we should invest. And I would say in our generation, we have not been able to achieve that. My hope is that the next generation, in all the countries, because the new generation has different kind of perception about life, different aspirations. So I hope they will see the ray of light, which we have, or in our generation, we have perhaps missed.
So what do you think after the post-revolution, after 5th July last year, the Bangladesh's foreign policy have evolved? Because our foreign policy was dominated by having a good relation with India. We have to take decision what India thinks about us, because we have a larger trade with India. We are pretty much dependent on the import from India. So those things we should keep in mind. We were keeping in mind before 5th July. So did we shift after the revolution in our foreign policy? How would you observe the situation right now?
Foreign policy of a country is run based on the national interest, as we call it, not by emotions. So the fact, our geographical fact, our economic necessities, they frame what kind of relationship we will have with other countries. So as of now, regardless of whatever we say, we are, I would say, connected in a chain. We import raw materials for our export from China and India, and export them to US and European markets. So we are connected to a chain where India is there, China is there, US is there, EU is there. So despite whatever we may say so, this connectivity will define what course we follow. I understand what you have said. Yes, we have some difficulties. We can always correct that. But we cannot do anything that will go against our larger interest. And the fact that whether we like it or not, neighbors are our most important actors or partners, whether we like it or not. China is our neighbor, India is neighbor, Myanmar is neighbor, South Asia is our neighbor. So we have to understand, and as we have learned recently in the last few months, that the kind of world that we used to see or we were familiar with, though that kind of world is now evaporating, because the United Nations, which was at the center of the global, what we call as an international order, or US, which used to underwrite that order, is gradually collapsing, fading. That means what? We have to look for an alternative. World order, regional order, or whatever order we call it. We have to understand our priorities based on our interest, our national interest. And here I think we need to have a deep thought, a strong, I would say, understanding about what we are and who could be our friends and how best we could promote our interest, not individually, also collectively, because the interest doesn't need to be either or. We can all work together, and that would be an important area to look at. And for a country like Bangladesh, we have to maintain our good relationship with all our partners.
Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to go on a short break on Talk to SATV, sponsored by Grand Palace Hotel and Resort. After the break, do come back, because after the break we will discuss about the Iran-Israel conflict. Welcome to Talk to SATV. Before the break, we were discussing about how Bangladesh was received by the Westerners and the other parts of the world in different decades. The face of Bangladesh changed from decades to decades, and Ambassador Kabir was advising or commenting how Bangladesh should, in their foreign policy, make national interest as the most important, factor. Ambassador Kabir, you have been to Middle East.
Yeah.
So you know how the situation is over there. You know how Iran, somehow ideologically and supports the Houthi, Hamas, Hezbollah, these armed forces of Axis. So why do they do that? Are this the reason for the airstrike that's been going on by Israel? And Lord Hammond said, the ex-Foreign Secretary of United Kingdom, that it is quite impossible to eradicate the nuclear program by airstrike. And what happened in Iran, and how Iran retaliated, and then interestingly, both sides condemned each other. Both sides claimed victory over each other. So how do you see the situations over there?
Thank you for another, I would say, very intriguing question. I would say the situation in Iran and in the Middle East as a whole is extremely volatile. Volatile because what the West is looking at Iran and how Iran looks at the West, there is a history of decade-old history. In 1953, if I may put it, let me put it this way, it's a kind of rounds going on. Rounds meaning that in 1953, the West won they removed the Iranian elected Prime Minister Mossadegh. US, UK, they joined hands and they removed that. So at that point, they won and they brought in Shah, Reza Shah Pahlavi. So West won, Iran lost. Then as a consequence of that, in 1979, as a protest against that action of the West, an anti-Western government came to power. Islamic Revolution took place in 1979, and whatever we see today. And Iran-West relationship is based on mistrust of each other for decades, as I said. And in 79, Iran won in the form of an Islamic Revolution.
True.
This time in 2025, it looks like that West is likely to or claim that they have won. But now you have mentioned that every side, Israel, Iran, US, all are claiming victory. The war is going on at least at two levels. One is the military level, another is the political level. So military level, whatever has happened, happened. But at a political level, Israel has a politics to cater to. Iran has a domestic constituency. They must show to their people that they have won. And for President Trump, same thing. He has to show to the Americans that we have also won. So at a political level, everybody claimed to have won. That's not unnatural. At the military level, we are not sure, because after the bombing by the US and also followed up by Israel, nobody knows yet exactly where the enrichment level in Iran exists at this point.
I'll stop you over there. Even the IAEA said that it cannot be solved militarily.
Right.
And diplomacy had an absolute fiasco over there. Because JCPO, Joint Conventional Plan, has failed just because of Donald Trump. And if you just listen to his Michigan, election rally, he said that he will never engage himself in the war in the Middle East.
Right.
So, isn't it the failure of diplomacy? Because who actually benefited from this war? That is Netanyahu. Because if there is a deal, back in 2015, the enrichment of uranium was 3.7, which is now 60, kind of 60 kg, which is actually can bring around 9 nuclear bombs. So if the JCPO was successful back in 2015, which didn't happen because of President Trump, so that actually catered Iran, or that actually influenced Iran to have nuclear power, because they're saying that Pakistan have nuclear weapon, India has nuclear weapon, North Korea has a nuclear weapon. So those who didn't have nuclear weapon, the regime has to fall. They have fallen. The West actually made the regime fell. Like Gaddafi was raped and sodomized.
Right.
Saddam Hussein fell. So maybe what do you think of the situation? Because now is it possible that whether there would be whether United States of America has the capacity to bring them on the table? Because Iranian foreign minister said in the last few weeks that the mistrust has risen. So is it possible to, through diplomacy, to get an understanding or get a deal?
Thank you. 2-3 possibilities. One is, as you have rightly pointed out, if the Americans want, they can come back and they can have JCPOA 2.
True.
That's a possibility. But the problem here is Israel. Because Israel, they have now complete control or dominance over the whole of Middle East now.
True.
Iran was the last bastion where the opposition remained. So from an Israeli perspective, they want complete supremacy over the Middle East. Now, the Israelis, as you have rightly pointed out, the Israelis actually motivated President Trump in 2018 to come out of the JCPOA.
True.
This time, same thing happened with Prime Minister Netanyahu, convincing President Trump to come and join the war. So here, the US will have to be fair or look at its larger or long-term interest. Because the way things are evolving now, if there is no peaceful resolution of the Iran nuclear issue, then at a last resort, possibly, Iran might think that nuclear weapon is their last deterrent or deterrence against Israel. So I think here the US can do it, but they have to be fair. They have to have a longer vision where they may have to also moderate the Israeli ambition, perhaps. If that can come, then a overall peaceful Middle East could perhaps start building up or start shaping in. But here we must not also forget the fact that the Palestinian issue is the core issue there as well.
True.
So that issue has to be resolved as well. Now, as I said, why I said fair? President Trump wants, he wants to do something big. Now, if he's really interested, I'm not sure, but I'm just hypothetically thinking that if he can have the Iranian problem resolved diplomatically, also addressing the concerns of Iran and Israel, so that's one piece. Another piece is Palestinian issue. If he can resolve or help resolve that issue, because already the formula two-state formula is there. It's impossible, it looks impossible, but if the Americans really intend to change the ground reality or change the context, they can do it. And we have seen that President Trump can dictate terms.
He said it's nice to have a deal.
Yeah.
President Trump last week said.
And if he can resolve the two pieces, the Palestinian piece and the Iran-Israel piece, then perhaps we can look at a very different Middle East where I think the American long-term interest could be served. But this is a hypothetical scenario.
So it all lies to President Trump?
Yes, Trump and the US, perception about their interest.
So you observed to UN as a representative of Bangladesh. So you know how Security Council is being inactive. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we all say, because they say that one day Ukraine will join NATO and then they will attack Russia, which is a bullshit. So the same thing happened with Iran, but the West responded differently.
Yes.
So isn't it the non-intervention policy? You have been a teacher of international law. You have taught non-intervention. I teach non-intervention as well in international law. So is it looking away? Is it looking like a lie, or do we need a new world order, or what is happening with the non-intervention policy that we did had in international arena?
I would say it's a lie. I think we have not respected this principle. True. That's the part of the problem. And actually, the idea of non-intervention, which is the core of UN Charter,
True.
That was basically compromised after the New York bombing on
9/11.
September 11.
September 11.
After that, the Americans conceptualized an idea called preemption or preemptive attack.
Preemptive attack.
That has compromised the non-intervention policy. And thereafter, the Israelis are using it, the Americans have used it several times. So I think as an idea, it's not dead and it's not useless. Definitely we should try to make it more vibrant, more useful. But again, the international community will have to think differently from what we have seen during the last few decades.
Ambassador Kabir, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on my show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the show. Before we end, we were discussing about how Bangladesh should frame its policy, keeping in mind the largest interest of the nation. We were also discussing the non-intervention policy that's been enumerated in the United Nations Charter, that even the United Nations will not interfere in any internal matter of the state until that internal matter affects international peace and security. And from which time this non-intervention policy has been violated or has been largely compromised after the 9/11. So now it's close to, fading away. So Ambassador Kabir has suggested that how our foreign policy should be shaped and how Middle East situation should be solved. And now we had come to the conclusion that it all lies to the Americans and their good wishes, and how, it shouldn't be solved without the two-state policy. So Thank you so much for being with us. We will come to the next week with a new guest, with a new topic. Until that day, goodbye. Allah Hafiz.